Okay, everyone, it is now 3 o'clock in my part of the country and a variety of different times. Since we seem to have uh, people signing on from around the world. We've had some people from Australia joining us recently, and we're glad to have all of you here for our December ZoomTRAK meeting. We'll have a little longer program today, but we're going to try to get it in just a little over an hour. Today's topics are an introduction to operations on modules by Bruce Alcock. Our vendor presentation today is Jacksonville Terminal Company, who specialize in containers. Then Terry Moore will have another of his, which we hope to be regular blog sessions where he's talking T-TRAK. Then we have a special for you, which we will put on. It is an introduction to something new that Kato has just come out with, and they wanted us to share that with you. Depending on time, I will have a short session. If not, it'll be delayed. And then our main topic today is foam scenery by Bruce Arbo. So again, the process is we ask you all to stay muted. Questions will all be asked at the end. If you notice at the bottom of your screen, there is just to the left of the green share is a chat button. You can push that and chat if you have questions or want to ask things, and that you can monitor throughout the deal. And we will go back to that at the end of the program and pick up any questions that have been unanswered. So with that introduction, we'll get things started off today with our first topic, which is the introduction to operations on modules. So Bruce, if you're ready, take it away.
Okay. Let me bring up my my slideshow here and start over here. All right. I assume we've got a full screen slide showing. Okay.
Yes, you do.
All right. So operations. The first operations article I wrote was back around 1989, and then I've done some presentations various places. So I've been involved with operations for a long time, and quite frankly, you never there is never a time when you can't learn something new about operations. Operation starts with looking at, what are you doing? You're basically mimicking the prototype. The prototype is not there to run trains. They're there to make money, and they do it by moving goods and people. They'll move a product, and some of that, a lot of the scenarios have changed, but basically it's still taking raw materials to manufacturers and then taking the goods that are produced to market. And in this case, we have cattle to packing houses and then meat from the packing houses to local distributors. Today, it's containers that might get loaded up in Kansas City after they've been driven over to the loading facility, and then taking those containers, going container trains to New York or Philadelphia or Chicago, and get unloaded and driven. But it's still the same basic concept. Instead of cattle today, you've got a lot of crude that's going to refineries, delivery, assembled automobiles. And then, of course, in order to be able to do those deliveries, you need to have empties returned back to the start again. So where do you operate? You can operate on a shelf layout at home, one person, on modules, or a club layout. In this case, we actually have a club layout using N-TRAK modules. This goes back about 10 years ago, and we had a small layout, and we did an operating session on that layout. Interestingly enough, today, not today, but during this week, somebody on one of the mailing lists was talking about how, well, they were talking about DCC, and they said, well, if you have N-TRAK or T-TRAK, you really don't need DCC, but in fact, that's not true. You can do operations on modules, and our club has done it, and I know a number of them have done it. What you need is a starting and ending point. Your train has to originate somewhere, and it has to terminate somewhere. You need industries, places to do drop-offs and pickups. In fact, that could actually be the same location if you're on a modular layout. We've got a scenario coming up where we'll cover that. You need trains with some cars and engines. Of course, operators put together a scenario, but probably the main thing is a driving force, somebody who really wants to operate. And it might be one person doing a session, just one person operating on a layout and being the only person, or as I said before, shelf layout. So when you build the scenario, you can put together a timetable or just have some very simple instructions. In this case, this is actually, this was our N-TRAK layout that we set up, and the start and hours at the east end and state line at the west end are actually on the same module. So the fact that you don't have two separated points doesn't really make a difference. Okay, you have a loop, and what you do is you create this invisible line, and this is sort of like, you know, east is one side, west is the other. It could be the same yard, and you just basically say, all right, a train comes in on one side, or it comes in on the other side, but you just don't keep running them through. These are endpoints. Now, in this case, we've got the red line and the yellow line with a crossover. What we did on our layout was treat the red line as the main line and use the yellow line as a passing siding, and the blue line was a separate railroad. The scenarios that you can have are anything from the simplest, where you basically swap out one car for the same kind of car, like, for example, a box car for another box car. Or you can use car top boats, where you actually have a little channel with a color on it, which indicates where that car is going to. You can do switch lists, and if you really want to get complicated, you can do waybills and car cards. You can either do those written out manually, or you can use JMRI, and there are a host of other programs also. Excel spreadsheets are very popular for building things of that nature. All right, instructions to the crew. In this case, this is one of those very simple scenarios that you have. You start off switching. What the instructions need to indicate what switching is to be performed, and then when you're done, where you put the train. So in this case, we have a switching job, picks up train at the location IN, which could just be a couple of sidings on a module, run around the layout. So you've done a loop, and now you're back to IN, but now IN is the place where you swap out some cars. So you have two tracks. So you take the cars on one track and swap them out for another. Then you go ahead and you turn the train around. Yeah, you need a passing siding where you can actually run around the train. And then you run it back to the same spot, and then park your train on the track that it came from. It's a very simple scenario, but it is basic operations. And it's not just running round and round. The setup yard instructions can get very complicated depending upon how complicated your scenario is. But again, this is done on a modular layout. It's not a dedicated club layout or home layout. You can use modular layouts to come up with some very complicated scenarios. What you need, track charts, which help the crew determine, for example, which track is track 3, where is an industry, and direction, westbound, eastbound. You can say, go, run your train westbound, but is that running it to the left or to the right? What we try and do is keep it same as the map. West is to the left, east is to the right. A lot of people try and do that, but sometimes you can't always do it, but the track chart helps you with that, and it provides the direction for you right in there. Put together a schedule. If you have one simple switching job, you don't need you really don't need a schedule, but your schedule might just be run this switching job, and it might be different people run it throughout the day that your modular layout is set up. You can have wave rates, you can have through freights. There are a number of different scenarios you can do, and the scheduling basically determines that. As I mentioned before, what we've run at our club is the red line as the main line, and then the blue line. In this case, we've got one point where they intersect, which is the main yard, wall yard. There are other places where there are actual physical crossovers, but one thing we try and tell people is, look, those two locations, the red line and the blue line, are now 100 miles apart, and you can't just, shortcut the procedures. When you're running operations, it's not free form. You go according to the instructions, according to the. Somebody is not muted. Okay, equipment. Having equipment in good running condition is really important, because there's nothing worse than having cars derail when you're trying to switch them. You have to stage before the session. Where you store the cars all depends upon what scenario you're using. If you have a dedicated switching layout at home, it's not a problem. If you're on a modular layout, you may have to put them out at the beginning of each session and then take them back. Owned by one or a few people, you want to be careful what you're doing with other people's cars. So you may have to have club cars or individuals who are willing to donate their cars. This was the actual layout that we had set up at one time. We had a setup yard up here on top, and we used a junction module to divert the red line in one direction, and the other red line became the blue line going into the staging yard, or in this case, you can see it's the yellow line here. But basically, you have two modules, these two modules down here, and then they come together into a standard T-TRAK interface, and that interface is to a junction, to a standard T-TRAK, not T-TRAK, but N-TRAK junction. But the same thing can also be done with T-TRAK as well. If you have you're just using two tracks instead of having the 3-track interchange. Sometimes the details can be interesting. For example, an engine terminal. If you've got an engine terminal in a yard on a module, you can go ahead and say, all right, when the engine has to come off of the ready track. When it's done, it's got to go back to the fueling track, and then you move it over to the ready track, inspect it, move it to the ready track. If you have livestock require special handling. They may need to go to the feedlot track and get get hay and watered. Reefers need to be iced, and just adding a fast clock is another way of adding variation. All right. At the end, what works, what doesn't, you want to go through and review your scenario and figure out what was working, what wasn't. If you've got rolling stock that's not working, that has a problem, you want that to be repaired. Track work is important, and engines need to be maintained. Make sure the wheels are clean, and that the engines will run at nice low speeds, because switching is probably the most challenging for an engine. Here are some references. OPSEG, which is part of the NMRA, they have monthly webcasts. They organize operating sessions at various locations, as well as the national convention. And they have a publication that comes out, I think, 4 times a year, which describes a lot about operations. The Inglenook and Time Saver are 2 switching puzzles that can actually be incorporated into modules. They're kind of like shelf layouts that then can become a part of, because the shelf layout is very small, well-defined, can be added to a module or a couple of modules. And this is one of the websites that has all the track plans for that. There's even a time saver that somebody did with for T-TRAK with the Kato ZoomTRAK part numbers. Micromart has the car cards, and of course JMRI has a website, and they've got an operations section. And finally, you can send email to me if you want to, if you have any questions, and I can answer them or direct you to the right person. And that is basically it.
Thank you, Bruce. Again, guys, we'll hold questions till the end. We're going to move now to our vendor presentation. Stan Brooks with Jacksonville Terminal Company is going to tell us about his company and his products. So Stan, you're up. Take it away.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to this event. This is our second presentation, and I just want to let you guys know that we're slowly rolling out with some new well cars. We just had our third release of well cars, 53 footers of NSCs, a CP scheme, and then we have a 2-pack TTX. And we at JTC, we're currently sold out. We do have some stock that's going to be sold at a discount because they're damaged, but we'll include all the parts. If anybody's interested, shoot me an email at stan.brooks, or no, it's stan@jtcmodeltrains.com. I can put it in the chat as well, so you guys have that. We're continuing to roll out our, I think it's an 80-foot flat car that holds 4 20-foot containers, and it has, I want to say, 4 different decks that we are going to be providing over the next year to bring in some older modelers, some 20-foot containers and stuff. Sorry about that. One of our newest products that we have and we've tooled already. I hope you guys can see all this. These are our new reefer units. We have 5 different sides and 8 different front ends that are individually tooled. That's 3 of them there. And I just dropped these other 3. Sorry, I'm working one-handed. There's another 3. So you can see the difference in the tooling of every single one. Some of them, the reefer units are actually held about 16 inches from the top of the container, and some have a 16-inch base on the bottom. So they're offset. So we tool each individual one to provide that prototypical modeling that you guys probably want if you guys are container people. Not in addition to these reefers, we're going to go one step further. And who wants to run a train with a reefer if you can't keep it cold? We got to keep our product cold, correct? Because that's what we're all about, operations. So we have 2 gen sets that will actually mount to the front of these reefer units. They're front mount gen sets, and they're going to be held on magnetically. So you will be able to move them from one of our reefers to any other reefers. And we're looking to potentially sell kits that you could retrofit your older reefers with a newer gen set, just so you guys can continue to model, prototypically. Not only are we doing the gen set front mounts, but maybe you have 5 reefers in your well cars that you need to power up, and then you don't need a gen set. Well, maybe you need a power unit. So right now we have 4 power units, all specifically tooled for Canadian Pacific, 1, CN, and K-line. These are specific containers, vents on one side, double vent on the other, plug-in power doors. And these will all be pad printed. So you'll see, we'll put like green lights on them, red lights on them, just to help, model that connection. we're not going to actually do any hoses or anything like that. That's a little complicated. And then, so those are our new power units that we'll be selling. Our current configuration is we'll probably sell these to start, where we'll run a set of 5 1 containers and then 1 power unit. So you'll buy six containers in a package. So you'll have the power unit would sit in the middle on the one. You'd have 1 container on top, and then 2 containers stacked on each other on the well cars on either end of the power unit. So that's how we'll probably initially sell them. And then we'll go, we'll probably make some more and sell them individually, or see what the market demands at that point in time. We have our 20-foot chassis that we've been talking about. Those are actually coming out 2021. I'm not sure the date yet, but they will be out in 2021. They'll have, I think, double bogey and triple bogey, just to simulate the different weights that we may have for the container weights. And then we also have the 53s, the 53-foot chassis will be coming out as well. And we know those are going to be probably some super hot items. So if you see them, you might want to get a hold of them. We want to let you guys know that we're not just modeling trains, we're modeling an industry. And we think that it just goes a little bit further than just sticking the container on a train. It's modeling the intermodal industry. We have gate entry kiosks that you could use for different yards. We're going to be doing other prototype, and also some like fantasy, which is more of our visionary series, where we'll develop a one entry unit that would be magenta and white. So that just to give a variety, so people can model whatever they'd like to. We have our holiday container. It'll be arriving. It's all a picture I got. It'll be arriving next week, and we'll be releasing that with our December release, which consists of some 53s and 20s. And these are some pretty nice schemes. CP, Florida East Coast, and we did a 2 set of the Amazon Prime. So we got 4 different numbers of the Amazon Prime. And then we have our 20-footers, which the top one is called Jules. And that's just part of our visionary series, where we made up a reptile food company, put a gecko on there so people can transport their gecko food if they need to. And then we have the Merce 20-foot rainbow, and then the Statue of Liberty from CMA CGM that they mocked up and shipped over here. We have our EMP series, which is the green EMP center logo. Then we have a hub group patch in the middle, the faded red, and then the pacer stacker on the bottom, faded as well. We will also have our 53-foot pacer stacker patches that show the difference in the areas of where they were patched on the vertical, with gray patches and blue patches.
This is your warning, Stan.
Very good. I'm glad. So this is another set of ones that came out in November. Our November release was a little late. This is a pale white and our magenta ones. We're currently right now in talks with some large shipping container, like some of these companies, real life. They want us to do some prototypical work for them for promoting their actual live business. And we want to bring it to the model railroad industry as well, and still support their initiative for their donations and what they're trying to support by using QR codes where modelers can scan, donate, and go down that track. So we're incorporating real life into our prototype track. Thank you guys very much. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you have any questions in the chat, and I'll just respond throughout the meeting.
Very good. We appreciate it. It's too bad you can't make those in one-to-one because the country needs them. All right, we'll move right into our next presentation. And Terry has started a little blog. We had him on here last month or the month before, and it was very well received. So he's going to just talk to us about what's on his mind today. So Terry, take it away.
Talkin T-TRAK is back. This time, we're talking about diagonal straight track that doesn't meet the edge of the module at 90 degrees. That can be a big problem for T-TRAK. This scenario shows sidings, or in the case of the middle one, a relocated main track that crosses between two double modules. In this particular case, those are doubles, at an angle. Perhaps triple or quad modules would not have the problem, but they may not be an option due to transport or other issues. This will solve the problem of joining modules with tracks joining at an angle, no matter what the angle. So this is today's exercise. Kato supplies us with several small track pieces to help locate the expansion track in the best place between the two modules. The expansion track is the star of this edition of Talkin T-TRAK. Here is what we've got to begin with. All trackage on the module on the left and the red and yellow mains on the right module are mounted. The proposed siding trackage for the right module is determined and its proposed location is known. Both modules are attached to each other through their main red and yellow tracks as normal. Here we go. First of all, take two rail joiners and remove the locking horns from one end of each of them. Join the expansion track to the siding on the left module with two normal unmodified rail unit joiners. Position the siding trackage on the right module 3/8 of an inch from the expansion track, which is at its shortest 78 millimeter position. Now, I sort of came up with the 3/8 inch measurement, as you can see in the graphic, as about the minimal spacing that could be used. You'll notice that those are the modified rail joiners with the cutoff ends sticking out. With both modules connected together and all other trackage attached to the respective modules, the 3/8 inch gap allows the expansion track to lie flat, and the siding track on the right module can be attached to that module base. For this exercise, this is where the trimmed unit joiners go, with the trimmed ends facing outward from the track pieces. The unit joiners could be placed on the opposite sides of their respective track pieces to prevent the expansion track from being inserted incorrectly. This is a little thought I had after I created this slide, but by putting those two unit joiners on the opposite sides of their respective tracks, they would interfere if somebody tried to put the expansion track in the wrong way, or if somebody tried to use a different piece of the expansion track. Thanks to the removal of the locking horns from the trimmed unit joiners, the right end of the expansion track, can be connected to or disconnected from the siding track without the force needed to overcome the track locking system. Anybody that has, attached and detached T-TRAK modules know that they lock in pretty good. The expansion track would be removed for transport, totally removed. And since this is a straight line track scenario, track scenery disruption will be minimal. The track would just fit right in with the scenery on both sides without having to disrupt the scenery. This is not just an any rail diagram anymore. I think people have probably seen enough of my any rail diagrams. The metal yardstick, in my case, it's a meter stick, but the metal yardstick provides a straight edge to keep the track straight as it's attached to the module bases. The 6-foot level keeps the modules straight and even across the front as the track is laid. Just a little added thought I threw in there for what it's worth. Now, although this whole idea was meant to make diagonal track layouts possible, there are also situations where sometimes you could use it on a simple straight track situation. Depending on the situation, expansion tracks may be included at a fixed length as a permanent piece of a layout design, as in figure A, the little piece of straight track at the top there. Not every layout scenario can be taken care of with different sizes of Kato track. It is true that people could cut and create the necessary straight tracks, but here I'm just trying to show a use for readily available parts and pieces. If a fixed length cannot be included in a track plan, the method I suggested here may be used as in figure B. I'm kind of stirring the pot a little bit here. What is this little box? It could be a small filler track module, but it's not a module. Merry Christmas, everyone, and best wishes for the new year to all.
That's to you.
Thank you, Terry. And we're good. We're back. We are at 30 minutes, and so I think what we'll do now, Bruce, do you have that Kato thing queued up, or do you want me to queue it up here?
Yeah, I've got it queued up.
All right. We're going to watch a little 6-minute video that Kato has just released, and I think you'll enjoy it very much. When that's over, we'll do our 1-minute stretch, and then we'll move on with the program.
I was going to suggest maybe people can stretch while the video is going.
Okay, let's do that then. So stretch while you're watching the video.
1 minute to go, and the engineer climbs aboard. Doors are sealed tight to keep out noise and dust. Modern air conditioning constantly circulates fresh air through every car. All aboard! And we're off on one of the finest daylight trips in the world.
From the late 1930s to the early 1970s, the Southern Pacific Line's Coast Daylight was arguably the most beautiful train in the world. The train's orange, red, and black striping resembled daylight rising above the California coastline and became the reserved scheme for Southern Pacific's most premier train lines. The Daylight ran its morning consist between Los Angeles and San Francisco, passing cities such as Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Jose. The train gave guests a 9.5-hour view of the beautiful California coastline before arriving in either Los Angeles or San Francisco at 6 p.m. Since the streamlined Daylight's inaugural run on March 21, 1937, it began seeing the highest ridership numbers in the country. The Daylight became so popular that a second train, the Noon Daylight, was added in 1940. The Southern Pacific Railroad spared no expense when creating this beautiful train, as SP Presidents Angus D. McDonald spent $1 million per train, each car custom built from stem to stern. Each car was designed and catered to all their guests' needs. From the swiveling sponge rubber cushion chairs and coach, to the coffee shop's luxurious carpets and drapes, to the revolving parlor chairs and a pebble tweed satrier pattern fabric in the observation car. Guests would be treated to first-class dining in the dining car and a large food assortment in the coffee shop, both serving more than 12 million passengers throughout the daylight's life. Rail luxury at its finest. Pulling this rail beauty was the Southern Pacific's premier 484 engine, the GS-class locomotive. The Southern Pacific streamlined GS2 locomotives were built at the Lima Locomotive Works plant in Ohio in 1937. Since the train's popularity, the Southern Pacific Railroad built the GS3, 4, and 5 locomotives to pull the train throughout the years. The GS4 locomotive became the most popular of the locomotive classes due to its only survivor, which is still around today, the 4449. The GS4 locomotives came standard with 80-inch drivers that could develop 5,500 horsepower at 55 miles an hour. They had a maximum speed of 110 miles per hour. The GS4 was also the first to utilize an enclosed all-weather cab and had a Mars light installed on the headlight, which would oscillate in a figure-8 pattern. Today, Kato USA will release a pre-World War II version of the classic train in all its beauty and end scale. The train will include a 10-car base and 2-car add-on passenger set, and a GS4 steam locomotive and 2 different road numbers. Each daylight passenger car set will include unique tooling for each specific car type, with an appropriate exterior design and all detail parts installed to match the early 1940s consist. Shock-absorbing trucks with constant electrical pickup, uniquely designed articulated cars, which use a movable exterior diaphragm to create the accurate, smoothly connected appearance of the prototype. These articulated cars include the 2-coach articulated car and 3-car coffee, kitchen, and dining car. The base set will include an observation car with a fully lighted drumhead and marker lights. These sets will also be available with pre-installed interior lighting. The base sets will be available this December 2021, and the interior lighted versions available the following month. Kato USA's GS4s are one of the most popular and best-selling end-scale locomotives in Kato's lineup. First premiering in 2008, this run will be our 5th of this locomotive. You may remember Kato USA visiting engine number 4449 at their shops in Portland, Oregon some years back.
I gotta go get my magnifying glass.
Our version of the locomotive will include the following features: a directional headlight, an operated simulated Mars light with illuminated number boards, a detailed cab interior, era-specific front-mounted number boards, and front and rear Kato magnetic knuckle couplers. In addition to the release of the GS4s and the daylight paint scheme, Kato USA will also be releasing a post-war black version of this iconic locomotive. This post-war black version of the GS4 will include an all-black paint scheme, rear-mounted locomotive number boards, which were prototypical for SP's locomotives after World War II, and will replace the traditional Southern Pacific lines lettering with the larger Southern Pacific on the tender. All versions of the GS4 will be available with pre-installed DCC and pre-installed ESU Loc sound. All versions of the GS4 will be available this December 2021, with the DCC and sound versions available the following month.
Okay, folks, kind of looking forward to that. If you're an SP fan, that ought to be something in everyone's collection. We are running pretty close to on schedule. Bruce, think we ought to stick my little thing in, or just go with it? If we go with Bruce's now, we'll finish up about 10 after the hour. I think that's what we'll do, if you don't have any problem with that. Bruce Arbo, if you're ready to talk about foam scenery, then I think everybody is ready to listen.
Absolutely. Hello, all. I hope everyone here is safe and didn't get affected by the horrible weather over the Midwest yesterday. But if we're all here, I guess we were blessed. This little clinic is basically how I am treating scenery, above ground scenery, I should say, or even below ground scenery on N-TRAK and T-TRAK modules for the last 10 years or so. I'm not so much the plaster guy, the old school over cardboard web newspaper netting. I'm trying to be just somewhat neater and a little bit more lightweight. So I started experimenting with foam as I'd seen others do. And I found a technique that I'm thinking I'm really enjoying for myself. I'm kind of midway through my learning process on it. And I keep learning new things with it every day and day. every time and every new module I build, I do something a little bit better than I've done before. And kind of that's the name of the game for me. But the foam I'm talking about, just so we can be on the same page, is not the beaded, what we call styrofoam, like we'll see in, ice chests and stuff like that. We're talking about what I call the home insulation foam, which is extruded polystyrene foam that you'll find in home improvement centers to be used between your studs in your home for basically home insulation. It comes in various thicknesses, or so I'm told. Dimensional lumber thicknesses from 1 inch all the way to 4 inches. But here in coastal Alabama, being such a warm climate year round, we seem to only get the 1 inch thickness. And of course, I said dimensional lumber. If you can see this here, I've got a piece of it. I know Dow Corning is one of the manufacturers of it, and can't recall the other name, but it comes basically in blue or pink colors. This is the 1 inch thickness that we get. It's really 3/4 of an inch thick. And it's sold generally in 4x8 sheets, just like plywood is. Although now I notice some home improvement centers like Home Depot are selling it in 2-foot squares. So that's basically what we're talking about here. And this is the foam I use for the above ground scenery. One thing I do have to mention with the foam, as it comes, as you buy it, there is a thin plastic sheeted coating on both sides of it that has to be peeled off before it can actually be carved, cut. Well, it can be cut with the plastic, clear plastic sheeting, but certainly before it can be laminated, glued to another sheet, that little clear plastic sheet needs to be peeled from both sides of the thing. Once that's done, it's pretty easy to score and snap. You can see how flexible it is, although it is fairly dense and thick. Basically, when I go in order of the tools I use, first of all, to work with it, the tools I'll use mostly, or I found after a number of projects with it, the ones I use the most are what I'm calling foam knives. These are very inexpensive knives, kind of like X-Acto blades. Here's a thin one, here's a larger one that can telescope out. And believe it or not, they're sectional. So if the end gets dull, you can actually snap off one section. And it, I don't know if you can see there you can see the scored lines where you can snap it. These are very, very sharp, and it's probably the easiest way to cut through foam. These are the ones I find I'm using the most throughout. I'll also use a serrated steak knife for detail carving. And I'm going to file share from here, share screen, to kind of show you. Let's see, is everybody seeing what I'm seeing here?
Yes, we are.
Yep.
The next most important thing for foam is that shop vac that you can see right there with the black nozzle right there. Even if you're using especially if you're using a serrated knife, or even the foam knife, the very sharp foam knife, you're going to get little bits of foam that break off and kind of through static electricity stick everywhere, especially your shirt, your face. So the shop vac is very handy here. Also in this photo, real quick, you'll see another thing I use. It's a Sure Foam Rasp by Stanley Tools. It's basically like a wood rasp or a wood plane, but it's plastic and it's specifically made for foam. I don't use them so much, but in the context of what this picture portrays, which is carving a road, basically a highway road through the layers of stacked foam, that rasp works out great. You can get off a very smooth surface, which I'll either cover with a plaster product like the Woodland Scenics Pave It, or my chipboard roads that I've come to use on all my modules now. Basically a compressed cardboard that's perfect for making roads. Let's see. Hot wire tools. A lot of people ask about hot wire tools. I have quite a few of them. These yellow and black accented hot wire tools are made from a California-based firm called Hot Wire Foam Factory. They have all types of tools. Here's a long blade, basically a cutting blade. It's basically a cylindrical steel blade chucked into this plastic handle. And you can see where this kind of thing comes in handy. I'm using it to basically carve sides to a dry wash here for this foam project. They make them in various lengths. Here's a wire cutting tool that can be adjusted, and the wire is thicker than, say, the Woodland Scenics nichrome wire that they use. It's also a very good tool. The only thing I'm finding with the hot wire tools that's tending not to use them so much is that they're slow. They're basically melting through the foam. And these are, hobby type tools for hobby craft projects. So they're not super, super, super strong. They don't get very hot. Here's another slide real quick of various sizes of these basic, what they call knives or cutters. Here's a rheostat device that Hot Wire Foam Factory makes, so you can dial up the heat. But even at the hottest on these craft knives, they're not so super, super fast to be using when you're cutting through many thicknesses of foam. Now, Hot Wire Foam Factory also makes kind of heavy duty actual foam knives. Those would be the easiest thing to cut with and cut through quickly, but they're industrial knives, and I actually don't recommend them for something like we're doing. Another couple of things I've used are a sander, little mini sander. I didn't bring the one I had and took a picture of it because it's kind of filthy with foam and sawdust, but it's basically this size, a little hand sander, and basically like a Dremel size mini sander. Those are going to come in handy for smoothing out foam. And I'll show you my first real project. The inspiration for our first real foam project for an N-TRAK module a number of years ago. Actually, gosh, 6, 7 years ago now. Wanted to create this mesa just outside of Laguna Pueblo, which is about 20 miles west of Albuquerque, right off of I-40, Route 66. As you can see, it's pretty large, and it actually dwarfs the trains on the old Santa Fe, now BNSF, right in front of it. So the only way I was going to be able to create something this large with foam, of course, is to stack the foam, since all I have are 1-inch pieces or 3/4-inch pieces. And that comes to the next phase and what I was going to try to do here. A lot of people have suggested with foam, and if you make a query on Facebook of the best way to glue foam to foam, you're going to get all kinds of answers. I think the biggest one I hear most is using like a latex liquid nails product that comes in the old caulking tubes that you need to use a caulking gun with. And I have used those before very early on. I will say it's not a waste of money. The product works very well, but what I've found that works just as good and is so much cheaper and is readily accessible is simple Elmer's white glue, Elmer's Glue All. The best thing of all. Just apply it in a thin layer, again, making sure that thin plastic sheet is peeled off your foam. Roughly cut the foam to fit. As you can see, I've kind of cut them in descending shapes as I've gotten towards the top of the slope part of the mesa here. And I basically just glued them together with Elmer's glue. Literally within 24 hours, I could pick up the module from the top layer of foam. That's how well the Elmer's glue works. Here at this point, I used a number of rasps and knives to kind of create the basic shape of the foam mesa there. On the bottom sandstone part or limestone part, that's I use that Stanley Sureform rasp and some that little mini sander from Black & Decker. And as you can see, it creates quite the foam swirlies, dusties there. And again, you just go back with a shop vac and zip all that up. Here's the foam right there. As you can see, I should have put that other picture in front that shows the basic forms, laminated forms before I actually started carving them together. This is next. Now you can see how far I've gotten along this with a sander. The top part, which is kind of portraying the parts of the sandstone that have eroded away and just left these kind of columns up, like you might see in Monument Valley, but the slope is still there. That part hasn't eroded yet through that many sedimentary layers. I actually just created with a separate piece of foam that I just stood vertically, or actually stacked foam, 1, 2, maybe 3 layers glued together. And then just kind of started carving with a knife to kind of create the vertical striations there. And again, on the smooth parts, I again used a sander just to kind of smooth that out as much as I could. You can see this is a 6-foot module with what I have there is, of course, red, yellow, and blue tracks. But in the foreground, you'll see I have red siding, or what we called orange at the Austin track. And then I have the alternate blue spacing in the back coming into the blue on either end as well. I did this on purpose. Austin track loves to have all of those lines continuous, but I wanted to force them to do some operations. So I ended both those sidings in the middle. So I was gifting that to them anyway. As you'll see here, something else I did with this first project, rather than just put scenery on the bare foam after painting it, I went ahead and gooped pre-colored Sculpting over all the exposed foam. This was an experiment. I thought I could get more detail by carving the Sculpting after it had dried. And of course, I pre-colored it with a kind of an earth sand color and just, again, scooped it all over there and let it dry. Then I used probably the tool I use most. This is a Dremel engraver, and it works on vibration. It's used for engraving, metal plates or your name or, serial numbers or whatever. That's what it's used for. But it works wonderfully for creating striations or any kind of detail in a foam. Here I'm using it right on the dried Sculpting. I've gotten to this point now where I've carved everything I think I wanted to carve. And I've got basically the painted foam, starting to add some of the little green woodland scenic clump foliage, which is meant to represent what they call, the juniper bushes or juniper trees, what we call cedar trees in Texas, but they're actually juniper that you'll see all over the Southwest. And then here comes where I really start to do a few things. Over that sculpted mold that's been painted, I use my favorite scenery applications, which are the Arizona Rock and Mineral products. I think you guys had him on a ZoomTRAK not too long ago. They make wonderful products. They're all made out of real rock, and he crushed them to various grades, from a powder all the way up to, what would kind of look like O-gauge ballast for talus. But he also makes little stone, like field stone, high desert field stone. Well, I generally mix it together and apply it with white glue over these basic scenery forms. That gives it a lot of life. And as you'll also see, I use an airbrush to kind of airbrush the various sedimentary layers on the top exposed parts above there. And again, this was an experiment, my first time foam scenery, so to speak. And this is kind of towards the end run there, what it kind of looks like finished. Again, you can see the differences into what the bottom layer was, obviously a limestone level, and then the slope, and then the what was exposed vertical columns with the various layers of sedimentary rock made up throughout the millennia. And then here it was at its first showing when we drove to Austin. Denise and I drove to Austin for one of the regional NMRA conference and shows, and I gifted the module to the Austin Track Club, which I belonged to when I lived in Austin. And it's still there. It's changed hands a couple of times, but they still use it in their various layouts. So after doing this, it was an exercise in learning. It was a learning curve that went pretty easily. I wanted to see if I can do the same thing on a T-TRAK module. I started off with an end cap, 180-degree end cap, and basically 2 triples that I planned to keep together. As you can see, off to the right-hand side, the 2 triples had basically a curve away from the front of the module towards the center and then back again. And of course, these are going to be slaved together. They'll always be shown together if they're used. But here you can see the technique of stacking the pieces of foam. I've glued them with Elmer's glue and waiting for them to dry. The slope in the background I've already started to carve. Here's a better pitch. You can see on the right-hand side where I've already started forming the slope with a sander, and the slope on the left has yet to get that process. On this particular module also, I want it below the level, track level scenery. So I cut out with a jigsaw the plywood to kind of create a river dry wash in the foreground side of the tracks. And I basically glued foam into that and carved down into them to create a dry wash. But basically the same techniques. Started off with the slope part, keeping it as smooth as possible. And then I was also going to have some vertical columns that I left flat on the top so I could easily glue those, as you'll see here. And this one I got a little bit more experimental, and I used a Dremel tool with a little metal cutter at the end, and basically started kind of just tapping it into that top part where it just gouged out a little bit. And I liked the effect there. I just kind of gouged out rock. Also did it into the slide of the slopes a little bit, as you can see. Easy to do, quick work, and then having the shop vac handy takes care of the mess. On this one, I'm waiting to do that. On the end cap, I did much the same thing, kind of a Monument Valley kind of look with those kind of mesas that are there. And here, as you can see a little bit more detail, what that rotary tool did. Again, not super fine carving, but you know, it looks like rock. On this one, I also use Sculpt-A-Mold, as you can see, to kind of blend that in. And then again, I painted the whole thing, basically a Cajon sandstone with matte interior latex paint that I custom mixed to match one of the Arizona Rock and Mineral products. That way, if rock or debris or talus isn't covering everything, you'll still get the effect of the color of the Cajon sandstone there. Here's the finished end cap. Again, kind of carved the vertical structures. And the Arbo Canyon, those two triples are to the left. This was their debut at a World's Greatest Hobby Train Show in Houston, Texas, 4 years ago, at the Kato booth. This was in Orlando, the NMRA National Train Show, for the National T-TRAK layout on Orlando in 2017. But basically, here's a look. As you can see, I've also decorated it with the juniper trees from the Woodland Scenics clump foliage there, just with white glue. Pretty easy. This was the next step that I wanted to try. This I wanted to get away from the Sculpt-A-Mold. I wanted to see if I could carve the foam, just bare foam, as neatly as possible and just paint over it. Here's a T-TRAK inside corner, again with the stacked foam shaped. I wanted to create a cut for the highway. So basically that inside corner was cut, and I started to basically scribe some vertical erosion type streaks into that cut. And as you can see, I also used the rotary tool and just a basic serrated steak knife to start carving rock layers as they would appear basically in the sedimentary rock around the New Mexico Arbo Canyon area. I also just kind of put a cap on top of it, just like I did the other ones, a separate piece of foam that I carved with a serrated steak knife to show that rock relief. And then you can see I kind of painted and exposed the exposed sedimentary rock, eroded rock, a lighter color right now. And then all the rest of it, just bare foam, no Sculpt-A-Mold here. Got the basic Cajon sandstone color of the matte interior latex paint. Little bit more tinting here with the exposed rock. This is just paint tinting at this stage. You can see I did a little work on the chipboard road there with the center line. And then, as you can see here, I just started adding some of the Arizona Rock and Mineral powder mix, sand, higher grades of their rock, and some of their kind of crushed fieldstone. And of course, secured all that with the white glue mixture, or actually Woodland Scenic cement, misted over after wetting everything with a 50% alcohol water mixture, just like you would do ballast. Here a little bit more detail, but again, this no sculpting mold here. This is just the bare foam painted, and then add the scenery on top of it. Here's kind of what you can see. Again, just scenery added on here. And so the clump foliage. Now the power poles up there, some highway signage. Careful people might notice I put the no passing zone on the wrong side of the road. It's always on the left side of the road as you're facing it. Guess I'll have to go back and fix that at some point. Here's the other side of that. Again, bare foam, carved, painted, Arizona rocket mineral scenery added, and then clump foliage. Then the finished inside corner module. The latest module, the latest reiteration I'm doing this is basically a double, T-TRAK double with double crossovers, with the Kato #4 double crossovers that are a little bit more prototypical for crossovers in North America. That's the concrete tie track, double track, but I painstakingly painted each tie with a wood tie brown color, so it fit in. Best done when you're listening to a football game or music or something else, something tedious that it's not going to drive you crazy. This is the separate cap for the exposed sedimentary rock that I just a couple of 3 layers of foam that I used a serrated steak knife to basically start carving into horizontal relief and vertical relief. And again, you're just kind of chipping away. There is no right way or wrong way. Everything's random in nature. So basically whatever you cut or carve off of this is going to look right. And that's the thing. But as you might see towards the bottom, the layers are much thinner there. And I tried to create different depths of the sedimentary layers like you might find over in New Mexico and Arizona on those exposed mesas outcroppings. And again, a different view of it. You can see the writing on the foam, on the top layer of foam right there. I guess that was the Dow Corning. And then I just glued it to the top of that slope that, again, I had smoothed over with the Black & Decker sander, the hand sander. Here it is. I have the cut right there, as you can see, exposed where the track is. They had to cut into the rock to lay the track, so to speak. On this one, I did something a little different. I had some of these Cripple Bush rubber rocks made by a company called Cripple Bush. They make an amazing amount of different types of rock, from exposed granite to shale to sedimentary rock, all different types of sedimentary rock. Well, I had almost a 2-foot section that I wanted to try to use. I'd never used it before, so I thought I might use this double module as a chance to use it. There's another photo of it. That's rubber. Basically cut a piece to kind of match that profile and glued it to that open cut in the styrofoam there. I fixed it with a little latex liquid nails that way, so I make sure it wouldn't, it wouldn't peel off. And then I kind of blended it in with a little hydrocal. But apart from that, there is no hydrocal or Sculpting mold on the rest of this module. That's all that smooth foam. But as you can see, I blended in the rock surface there, and I went ahead and painted it a much lighter, basically like a limestone color, in anticipation of using tints and washes to kind of get it to a more of a rock color. Here's the process of tinting and washing. I'm also adding some of that Arizona rock and mineral to help blend it in even more. These are basically just in progress photos. Again, all the rest of the mesa is just bare foam painted with the Cajon matte interior latex paint. And now you can see I've ballasted the track in front. added a lot of the Arizona rock and mineral fieldstone again, just like I have in the previous ones. A few scattered, what do you call the little grass tufts? And again, the juniper trees that you'll find all over the American Southwest. And another good photo of the different grades of Arizona rock and mineral stones. You basically just drop into place, sift it, pour it, whatever, and where it lies is where it sits. And then I just secure it with misted scenic cement. Again, pre-wet it with the alcohol mixture and then mist scenic cement over it. And it looks random and it looks normal. But again, I'm kind of pleased with the way the rock molds turned out, those purple bush, and after blending them in with the foam there. And that's the finished double module. But basically, that's my progression in how I've gone and how I like to use the foam now. I don't think I'll use anything else. I'll add things to it, but my basic scenery forms, especially on T-TRAK modules, to keep them very lightweight, will be done with foam. So that's where I am right now. I probably have about 3 more Southwest style foam modules as I moved west in my T-TRAK module building. Pretty soon I'll run out of Arizona and I'll make it to California, where the deserts will get flat until I enter the citrus groves and then eventually Cajon Paths. So that's kind of where I am with the foam right now. I hope some of this has been helpful to anybody that's thinking about doing scenery with foam rather than the age-old plaster. But that's about all I've got.
Thank you, Bruce. It's very, very well done. Next month, ZoomTRAK meeting will be on January the 15th. We have not firmed up all of the presentations yet, but we will shortly. Bruce, you're going to put up a questionnaire. There you go. Bruce has got this poll up. If you will all fill it out, we would all appreciate it. The feedback we get from you is important when we prepare our presentations for upcoming sessions. If you have a home layout or you are in a club that has a modular layout, we need layout presentations, layout tours. So if you have one or thought about doing one, it'd be a good time to do it. Let us know, because we have slots open. If you have a presentation you would like to give, let us know. We'll get you on the schedule. I'll tell you more about this next month, but also realize besides all of these presentations we have on Zoom, on the NRail website, if you get into the member section, you will find that there are a bunch of N-TRAK tips and techniques on that thing. We'll talk about that a little bit next month, but go there and check it out and you'll find these things. They won't be the video presentations, but they will be more magazine style presentations with a lot of interesting information that may be helpful to you. So with that in mind, we'll leave this up for a couple of minutes while you all finish the poll. We thank you all for coming and attending, and we look forward to seeing you again on January the 15th.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for JTC?
There are some questions sitting in chat right now.
Let's see what we've got there.
Yeah, we got one from John Shields. How do you keep all the layer cuts parallel, Bruce?
Well, actually, I use this foam knife. The one this is my go-to knife now. I can get it about, oh, what is that? 3.5 inches, 3 inches there. I basically just cut down into it. It's much faster, much sharper, a much nicer, cleaner cut than anything else. And it's much faster than that hot wire tool. For forms that are very high, like the Arbo Canyon one and the original N-TRAK 6-foot N-TRAK module, I use a very long serrated knife. I use one of the bread carving knives we have in the kitchen. We don't really carve our own bread anymore since we have sliced bread here in the United States. so that's been relegated to doing that. But that, again, that keeps the general forms all straight. That handheld sander does all the rest. That's fast work. Using that knife and those sanders, you've got that entire mesa pretty much smoothed out in a half an hour. It goes much quicker than you think.
It's amazing how fast that you had a picture of the little yellow rasp, the hand rasp.
Oh yeah.
That thing does an excellent job of getting your rough shape down in really quick order, knock the edges off.
The only downside of that rasp is the foam particles that it creates. So literally I use the rasp in one hand and the shop vac nozzle in the other.
Yep.
If I could figure a way to tape that shop vac nozzle to that rasp, to the back part of that rasp, that'd even be better. So,
well, that's the modeler's basic answer to that is duct tape, man. That's the answer to everything.
There you go. And I got lots of it. So that's the next reiteration of that tool.
All right. Somebody had put a note on here about Glidden gripper as a paint that you can glue these things together, and it is fantastic. Unfortunately, Glidden is no longer making gripper, and you can't get it anymore.
But it was a paint. It was a paint that acted as an adhesive.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was a special paint that Glidden made, and Home Depot and Lowe's carried it, but they don't anymore because Glidden quit making it. Apparently, the demand wasn't sufficient, and so they stopped making it. It was good stuff. But your white glue works, and like you said, that Loctite that's designed for the foam also works well, and it looks nice. What you did really looks good. All right. Do we have any other questions that we haven't addressed?
Yeah. What kind of paint did you use to paint the concrete ties?
Oh, I think we had a discussion on Facebook. Let me think. And it wasn't enamel. You know, I tend to want to use acrylic. I think I used an enamel in this case because it painted, it was easier to thin and I had better control. I used a micro brush, you know, those little bitty micro brushes. Another advantage of that is sometimes we clean our track or rail with alcohol at shows. And if people accidentally use the wrong alcohol, like I've seen people use 90% alcohol accidentally to clean their tops of the rails at shows, then of course it'll start to try to remove the acrylic easier than it will the enamel. So yeah, it was enamel if I recall. I don't recall the exact. I still have some Flocal Rail Brown left, believe it or not. I bought tons of jars, so I'll use that until I have to use something else. You know, a special formulated brown.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. And Bruce, you got your polls back the way you need them. Here we go. There's the results. Looks like had pretty good positive response to things this week.
Yep. We did.
Again, thank you all for attending. We had a very good attendance for this session. I saw it up 84, 86 members, which is
89.
good. So spread the word. We'll be back next month. Hope to see you all again then. Thank you, and all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Right. Merry Christmas.